Testing. Okay. All right. Thank you. If everyone could get their seats, and we are ready to get this show on the road and get it started. So, are all of our council members here? I know we're missing one school board member, Dr. Sinha and Miss Evans. So, and Sterling. Sterling is not here. So it's 4 o'clock, actually a little bit after by that clock, but we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone, and I will turn to Ms. Morrison, our school board chair.
Welcome to what was once my home for a very long time, E.C. Glass High School, Marie Waller Lecture Hall. And before we begin, if you need to use the restrooms, if you go out this door, turn left, you get to the men's. If you turn right, you go to the ladies. We are excited to have this tonight, and we've been talking about this for a while. And before we start the meeting, I'd like to go over the Lynchburg City School Board Retreat Work Session Covenants. Number one, this will not be a problem for anyone. Have an open mind, stay on topic, and we have a trick to help us do that. Take turns, listen for understanding while reserving judgment. Do be mindful of time. And you'll see our trick in a little while for that one.
Thank you. And if we could, just for a minute, have a moment of silence for the victims and the tragedy that occurred this weekend in Pittsburgh with the faith community, and they are in our prayers. It's with love and a spirit of peace that we recognize that there are people grieving. And so for that, I would like for us to take a moment of silence, and I'm going to turn also to Ms. Morrison.
And we recently lost a valuable member of our school community. Dr. Tom Webb passed away last week, and we will sorely miss his smile and his trust in Lynchburg City Schools.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I will give just a brief overview because I know everyone can read through the agenda. But as Susan said, we have met, and we've done some deliberate planning, and hopefully some thoughtfulness has been applied to the agenda. And I know our city manager and our superintendent of schools have worked well to get us to this point. So we will have the reflection of questions and a brief report out, which will include Dr. Edwards and our city manager, Bonnie Severchek. We have some proposed questions down there that will get you all to ponder through. They're being asked for a reason, so please start thinking of some answers and maybe some vision that you'd like to throw out there to us. We will have a working dinner, and so that will be set up and from 5:30 to 6:10. So if you all don't mind, we're going to work straight on through. Okay, so get a little chow and then we'll work. City school meeting recap from February 7th, 2017. We thought that was important because, one, we have new board members here. That evening was some work that was put in by council members and board members. So we wanted to kind of revisit that to see where we were and how to move forward on that. And Dr. Edwards will then do the presentation of the proposed LCS goals. The school board, what we've heard, has had a great retreat, and she's been working with staff and school board on some things for a presentation. Then we'll talk about the goals, long-range facilities planning for schools, and kind of closure and next steps. So that is the agenda. And with that, I will then turn to our city manager and Dr. Edwards.
All right. Here. So we thought it would be fun to run it like a classroom and really have an engaging experience. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are at the table, and also to let you know that we will be switching seats a couple times this evening. So if you're comfortable, you might want to push your stuff out a little bit because we will be moving chairs. Between, I think, every 2 people, you will see there is a yellow card with a stick on it. Bonnie, hold that up for me. There we go. That is our polite way of talking to one another when we are off topic, which sometimes when we get going and we start talking about things that aren't related to our agenda, it's hard to get the people back on target. So it's just a nice
Not the
way
red
of
one,
just
Jeff, not the red one
waving,
yet.
and it works, right, Mrs. Morrison? It works on me, it works on everybody, of just keeping us keeping us on target. And our board has been using that. Yeah, we can make you some too. Our board has been using that to really help monitor us and be mindful of staying on topic. The other thing is you have the red circle, which is the clock. So sometimes even though we're on topic, we're just on that topic way too long. So we will wave the clock that just says we need to be mindful of time. If we want to stick to our agenda, sometimes it'll remind us to wind down. Some of the activities are we're going to talk and then we're going to report out, so we want to make sure we have time for reporting out as well. There are a couple other things that are on the corners of your table. You have some blank paper. I'll explain what we're going to use that for. And there's also some Post-it notes. The other thing that we do is during the course of the meeting, if you have a question that's not related to the agenda or not one of the things that we're discussing, but it's a burning question, if you write it on a Post-it note and give it to Denise, myself, or Bonnie, we'll get back to you with that. It's something that we might actually be able to either answer later tonight or at some other point if you have something that is a burning question. So any questions about those things?
All tools have been,
I'm sorry?
go ahead, Jeff.
Nope.
Oh,
Okay.
I just said all tools have been approved by leadership, so
Yes.
there we go.
Yes, they have. Okay, so first we're going to start. We thought it would be really great if we mixed you up into groups. And you're actually going to be in 3 different groups with different people. And that will give you the opportunity to talk and express ideas with people who you don't necessarily sit and talk with all of the time. And the groups are mixed, board members and city council members. So we are going to move you. And I am going to call you out and tell you what section to go to and see how quickly you can get there, like my class. And then we'll move on to the next activity. So group 1 is actually going to be over there in that corner where Mike and Valerie are, and that is Susan, Bob, Mike, and Jeff. You are all going to be in group 1 over there. Group 2 is in the corner right over by Turner. That's James, Bell, Trinae, and Sterling. That is group 2. So you can kind of swing around that corner there. All right. Group 3 is on this end here. That's Atul, Charlita, Mary Jane, and Bo. Oh, look at that. You're all in the same, that worked out. And then group 4, you're coming down here, Sharon, Kim, Turner, and Randy. Yes, I'm just waiting for my group. All right, we're all together? Okay, so here's how we're going to do the first activity. The first question is, what are 3 characteristics of an excellent school system or excellent school division? So what I would like you to do is think about that on your own first. There are Post-it notes in the corner table, yellow Post-it notes. You are going to grab a Post-it note and write on your Post-it note what you think are the 3 characteristics of an excellent school division. Then when I tell you, you'll talk amongst your group and then we'll share. So right now it's think, and then we kind of pair and share is what we call that in our circles. So you're doing it on your own right now. Okay, now that you've had an opportunity to think what your individual 3 were, and then of course you had an opportunity to share with your group, and most of you probably figured out like what do we have in common and What are some things that I might not have thought about? One of the reasons why we do this activity is just for alignment, to really see what people think about what makes an excellent school system. And it's real important that the people who are leading the school system, leading the city, have the same or similar understandings about what makes a good school system. And I don't know that we've ever had an opportunity to talk about that to the degree that we're about to right now. So it's a perfect opportunity to just make sure that when we say excellent school system, what does that mean to me? So you had a chance to do in small group, individual, and now what I'm gonna have are the people on that side of the room. You're gonna share, because we can't read everything that you wrote over there, you're gonna share some of your thoughts and ideas with the people on this side of the room. And I have a little thing that I use when I teach. It's called 3 Before Me. And what happens in most classrooms is you ask a question, and then Atul will answer the question, and he'll look right at the teacher, and I'll go, great job, Atul. And then the teacher asks another question, and then Randy will look, and I'll go, oh, excellent idea, Randy. But who's not talking to who? The students are. So I have a rule that says somebody from one side speaks, and before I can get back in the conversation, 3 other people either have to comment or engage that student or that person in what they just said before the teacher gets back in and redirects it. So you are not talking to me, you are talking to each other. Are we good with that? Okay, all right, it's up to that side to lead it off, and anyone on that side can lead it off.
You just want us to tell our 3 things?
No, I'm just gonna go. Safe schools, kids learn. What? I could talk louder. How's that work? Is that good? Okay. Safe in schools, kids learning, and I almost can read the small print, but not quite, and happy. High student achievement, including scholastics and athletics, and engaged staff, operating efficiency. Success Academy for all students, high satisfaction. Yeah, and even with glasses, I'm not sure would help, but scores and family and staff. Okay. High achievement for all students, success goals, students drive thinking, staff, safe students, facilities. All right. Strong parental and community engagement and involvement and investment. Achieving accreditation consistently for all student demographics. Stellar program and teaching that leads to students graduating into high-paying careers, post-secondary education, military, and other opportunities. All schools accredited. All student needs are met. Great modern facilities. An accepting culture that embraces all learners. Achieving excellence. Building administrators that embrace all learners achieving excellence, and teachers and staff embracing all learners. Students and all staff feel safe and secure, the chance for all students to be successful regardless of the path, and all students and staff feel valued. Questions or comments, I guess?
In our group here, it was interesting that the 2 members of council were concerned about the accreditation, and Bill and I had some other supporting things that will result in that. Actually, we all did, but that was very interesting to see those thoughts being reflected.
Anybody else?
We talked about for anything to happen in a school, the students and the staff must feel safe, and they must have a safe place to learn and to work, and that includes facilities that are adequate to meet the needs of the learners and teachers.
We also talked about the fact that there needs to be high satisfaction amongst all different partners, which are the students and the families and the staff, that they need to feel that they're supported, they feel this is a good system, and they're satisfied in that system. That's a high ranking there.
We also had the parental and community engagement, and feel that's essential for students.
Good job. You guys kept it going before I had to get back in it, which is really how you want to have those productive conversations. You almost never want someone talking directly to the facilitator and back. It really is about the engagement. Okay, this side, anybody want to share? Okay, you've been voluntold.
To go over there and read off?
You can do any way you want. It is an open classroom.
Okay. I'll do it. Just
Good luck reading.
we'll see. It's 2020 for now. So 100% accredited, no gaps. And I don't know if you want to sort of explain what you meant by that.
No achievement gaps, no salary, a gap-free system. We should not talk about any kind of gap.
Okay. State-of-the-art facilities, high-performing students according to recognized and respected metrics, excellent facilities for our students to learn in, qualified, motivated, and long-term faculty and staff, state-of-the-art buildings, student success, achieving equity and diversity, fully accredited, fully funded, state-of-the-art facilities, staff compensation, allowing us to retain highly qualified staff, safe and effective, a system that respects diversity, encourages, and expects the best for all kids. Did I get that right?
Yeah, but intellectually challenging.
Oh, that goodness, I couldn't read that at all. Yikes. Education for all. Collaborative system. Council and school board works together to support the public schools. Teacher abilities. Teachers demonstrate mastery of academic subject matter, have highly skilled class management skills, and are highly motivated, motivational rather, and intense parental and community engagement.
Groups, a lot of the same things that we hear were also on there, from accreditation to great facilities to safe facilities to culture and diversity. So at least, even though we were separated, but a lot of the same things were kind of captured in both sections.
I agree. I think we were different groups, but our thought processes are almost leading us in the same direction across those different points. I saw that within our group too. It's the same.
We can continue to talk about the achievement gaps, but what we want to do is and what we're trying to do is to match everything, the funds, the resources, the teachers to the students who are having difficulty, to see what's the best practice and try to use that as a base to eradicate or to eliminate those gaps. So that's not something that we're talking about. We are actively pursuing that.
And I think I like that intellectually challenging, because once you eliminate these gaps, then we can aspire for that higher, which is being intellectually challenging, take them someplace where no other school system does.
That's a good vision.
One observation that I would have, I do think all of us have identified many things that are similar. All of the things that we've identified are items that talk about high quality, excellence, continuation of high performing staff and teachers, excellent facilities. One pretty obvious element that is not on any board, but it is a fundamental precursor to all of those things, is the funding with which to pay for it. And you're not going to get high-quality teachers, attract them or keep them, or outstanding facilities, or excellent resources with which to work in programs if it's not adequately funded.
I guess one thing that, when you look at this question, what is an excellent school system? A lot of our discussion was around big picture things, as opposed to the specific metrics. For example, I realize accreditation is, somewhat of a bare minimum, and it's a test that can change various from year to year, and results can change, and I realize that's kind of a metric. But the reality is what we need is to make sure that kids learn. Make sure that the kids are being able to think, and rather than just, some rote memorization. And so with that, we didn't have, I don't think we had many in our group that discussed about those bare minimums like accreditation or passing, something, because those should be the floor. Those should be the smallest items, and we should excel well past that. Same thing with funding. Obviously, funding is a necessary component, but what makes a great system are the big things. Kids are safe and the teachers are happy, and everybody's kind of rowing the oars together. I think that makes for an excellent system.
I would agree. I really think that our side was really much better than the other side. I think that's clear. There's no question about that. So we'll see how you do the second round.
Let's see, number 4 over there.
But one thing, just briefly, that the school board talks about a lot, which is having a high-performing school board in order to have high-performing schools. So we really do think that what happens in the schools has a lot to do with what the school board does, and I think it probably extends to the city council also, as far as your leadership and what you all do is crucial for us to have high-achieving schools. I was only joking about the first one.
Oh, no, it was true.
Okay.
It's called wait time. It's a very difficult thing if you're teaching to have that wait time and just look and see that everybody get an opportunity to share, comment, because as we know about learners, some people you ask a question and others are pondering, they're really thinking, they're deep thinkers. And the thing that we have to do in our classrooms is make sure that we have opportunities for but also for the ones whose hands don't go up first and they're deep thinking. And we might not know that. We might miss those children. So as we talk about what an excellent school system looks like and what excellent instruction looks like, that's one of the things that when you go into a room, you can actually just observe, is the teacher providing opportunity for those deep thinkers? I like to call them sometimes the daydreamers. They look like they're looking out the window and you're like, are you even paying attention? And that might be that deep thinking that they're having about some of these questions. So I do thank you for participating in that. And we are going to, we are shifting. See, I got my handy sidekick here. We are shifting into question number 2, which means we mix up the groups. So if you took some travel things with you, you might want to take a second, because we are going to mix up the groups. The numbers stay the same, so group 1 is still over there. And this time, group 1 is Susan, Sterling, Mary Jane, and Kim. Group 2, Bob, James, Bo, and Randy. Group 3, Mike, Bell, Atul, and Turner. And then group 4, Jeff, Trinae, Charlita, and Sharon. Okay, so in addition to mixing it up, I also want you up and moving around from time to time to get some stretching going on, so if you wonder why you move.
The group I get to be with.
Okay, this second question, and you do have the questions, but I will read it. What are 2 major priorities facing our schools? We are going to do this one a little different than the Post-it note activity. And again, we're part engaging in conversation, but also talking about what are good, engaging strategies to use, especially if you have people who my voice isn't heard all the time, or my voice is heard all the time. It depends on your group. So you have some scrap paper in your group. It's multicolored yellow. Take 2 each, please. 2 pieces of scrap paper. Yes, it is, and I'm glad you said it, so I'm gonna go right to that. Okay, so you are going to list 2 priorities for you, and this is individual, so you have 2 sheets of paper, so put 1 priority on one sheet, 1 priority on the other sheet, as you see it as facing our schools. So what are 2 priorities as you see fit, so that answers your question, Jeff, that you think are facing our schools, and you are not going to share this with your teammates. This is a silent, this is what I think for real. 2 priorities, 2 separate sheets, yes sir. 2 priorities that are facing our school. And then Denise is gonna grab that blue bucket, and we're gonna collect them from you. So fold them, nobody knows what you wrote. Inside, it might be easier. So Denise is going to come around. You just toss them in that bucket as she comes around. She'll make a couple sweeps. And again, the question is 2 major priorities facing our schools. So now Denise is going to mix them up. And then she's going to pass them back out to you. So you are going to get 2 that might not be the 2 that you wrote. So while Denise is handing these out, let me tell you a little bit about why we do this activity this way. Particularly when you have topics that are sensitive and that you may have some people who don't feel like talking in public, or they may not want you to know that that's what they said, even though that's what they felt, but what they felt is important enough to communicate. So we tend to do these anonymous ways of participating to allow people to have voice when it comes to sensitive issues. A lot of this is done during equity work. You can imagine sometimes conversations around equity can be very sensitive and challenging, so we do this. And what it does is allow you to respond, but also read what someone else wrote, not necessarily what you wrote, and then you get to comment and react on that. So what we're gonna do, and your mics on the table do work if you just pull them closer. You will read, you can read 1 or 2 of them, it's up to you, and then just respond to what you read, whether or not you agree with it, maybe you have a question about it, you don't understand it, or maybe it's not something that you agree with as a priority. And we're gonna start on this end with our mayor.
First is increasing staff salaries, and next is achievement gap. So,
any thoughts or comments about what you read?
Yeah, we would all like to probably increase staff salaries and bring our teachers and all of our staff up to the minimum of where they need to be and beyond. So the thing is, how do we do that? And how do we continue being efficient yet successful, meeting all the needs? So, and then with the achievement gap, I think it's what Dr. Gupta said is let's just eliminate all the gaps wherever they are.
The first one is parent involvement, and the second is gap between student subgroups. I think all of us in the room would agree that whenever our parents are involved, our students win. So I just think that's a no-brainer, and we need to find innovative and creative ways to work to engage our parents and families. The second is the gap between student subgroups, and I do agree that we need to work diligently to eliminate gaps between subgroups. We should get to the point where gaps or disparities are unacceptable. We should not be talking about the scores for Black students or white students or Hispanic students or, economically disadvantaged students. The bar is the bar. We don't lower the bar for subgroups. We help lift our students to reach the bar.
Operating within your means, and I believe that's something you have to do when there's a budget. And according with the school board, that's one of our primary functions, is to make sure that we do operate within our means. But we all know when you have budgets, that doesn't mean that you are not going to want to try to, or hope that you have some other funds or revenue coming in so you can do some of the things you want to do. And we also know when you have a limited budget that sometimes you have to make cuts. And those cuts do impact your life, and they can negatively impact you. So we have to operate within our means, but at the same time, there are some things that we are not able to cover, especially the school system, especially when we have so many children that are in need. We're no longer talking about children that are there and they may need a Band-Aid. We're talking about children that have significant health problems, mental health problems. And emotional problems that really need different assistance and different aids, and we have to take care of that. That's one of our rules, guidelines that we have to do. The other one is increased parental involvement. This includes pre-K and continues through high school. If parents were positively engaged in value education, it would translate to their child's outlook. And this is something that we've already talked about. This is important. But I thought about, what does that look like? It may look different to different people. I see in my neighborhood, I see parents walking their child to school, and I think they're saying, have a good day. So, and some people may need some more education regarding that, but I really do think when parents send their child out to school, they want them to be productive and have a great day. Now, they may need some other services to try to help them? They may, but some may not. They're doing the best they can, and they are doing a great job, and you see they're walking their kids to school, and they have their backpacks and different things, and they tell them, have a great day. But we do need to just continually encourage parental involvement.
Two of mine, or I guess are somewhat similar, are almost identical. Salaries is one, and the other's salaries compensation. The other one's salaries and new buildings. Salaries and compensation, I think, is definitely a function of what the school board really has a lot of say in. Over these last several years, I know the interim superintendent said there have been hundreds of extra employees that were added in spite of having hundreds of less students. And so when you look at compensation, I think you can't say we want more compensation and more employees. You can really look at the mathematics of it and say, well, all those raises went to hiring more employees. And I think a lot of the school employees kind of realize that. If there's an ability to take that money from all these new hirees, you can easily give the money to give raises to and compensate your best teachers. I've said that since 2004, and I hope that can actually happen. The other one had the salaries as well, plus a new building, elementary school. With that, I think I'm sure that is a priority. We need to, in my opinion, I think we're pretty tight right now from a debt service capacity, and I think we need to really work together as a team. And I was delighted when the superintendent came before council the other day and said that we are, and recognizes that the schools are part of the city and part of a team, rather than, I think in the past it's kind of been almost like a I characterize it as like a spoiled child that says the only thing is that matters is me. And I was delighted that your superintendent and the school board recognizes that we got challenges as a city. We have hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and storms that came through, wiping out dams and bridges, and working together is what's going to be best, rather than just saying, hey, it's the only thing that matters is us. So, thank you.
Is it both?
So, yeah, yeah. Salaries, compensation, salaries, new buildings.
Yeah, twofer. Okay. This card reads, quit having excuses and have accountability and demand results. Yeah, I'm going to read in between the lines on this one. I think this is more of a, let's call it buyer's remorse. If you look at the records, you'll see that the Lynchburg City School System has one of the highest, I guess, highest cost per students in the Commonwealth. I think Charlottesville is higher. I think Fairfax may be higher. But we're not having the results that Fairfax has, which is consistently one of the top schools in the Commonwealth. So I think this is, if you're paying full value, then there's an expectation that you're going to receive full value, and a frustration that the results aren't there. We are seeing improvements, but we, frankly, for the price that we're paying for students, we should have much better results than we're having. And I think that's what this card is, the frustration in this card. The second one is competition with private schools, which I think is kind of ironic that I got this one, seeing as my children go to private schools. And why is that? Yeah, it's because I don't want to have my children learn by the SOLs. I want them to be free thinkers. I want the teachers to be able to teach and not teach to a specific formula that's dictated to, like a one size fits all. And I want the teachers to be able to do what they do. And that's why I choose to send my children to private schools. So is competition really a threat to the public school system? Is it a concern that those that are fortunate enough to afford private schools are going to pull their kids out of public schools and therefore impact the schools in a negative manner? I think that's an interesting question, and I'll pass off that.
So what I have is the excellence in education for all and closing achieve gap. To me, I agree, excellence for education for all is our goal, and that's what we should be doing. And as I mentioned before, achievement gap is reducing the gap is a priority. And I like the word intellectual curiosity or intellectual challenge that takes us above looking at very micro level gap. Instead of, we should be looking at more macro level in terms of what we want our students to do. And the next one is preparing students for workforce. And to me, I agree with that, because we have to train them for workforce. If we don't, then we are not doing our job well. Whether they are going to the college, but we start that process here. Because at the end of the day, even if they are going for a 4-year college, that is a building block process. So the first foundation is laid in our high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, and then when they go for higher education, they build up on that foundation. So we need to be technologically ahead of everybody else in terms of providing the high-tech education to our future generation.
The first one I have is facilities. It says old buildings, small schools, bus routes are complicated. I think the facilities is a big issue. We have a lot of buildings that are old. We have a lot of buildings that need work. The idea of the new elementary school, the biggest issue with that comes down to funding and figuring out how we're going to pay for it. And I think that's a big problem coming up for the school board, is figuring out what's going to come first and how we prioritize what's the most important for the schools. The second one is curriculum that is comprehensive or inclusive around race regarding all subjects. I think this one also deals with the achievement gap. I think it all kind of goes together. What we've been talking about, how important it is to get rid of the achievement gap between subjects, and I think this speaks to that as well. Yep.
So my first one was funding teacher salaries, maintaining high-quality staff. Certainly the board, that's a priority for the board this year. And there's been a lot of serious effort devoted to try to improve teacher salaries and provide them some confidence in some future increases, very modest, but anyway, that's a concern for the division, and it reflects on pretty much everything we're trying to do. You know, if we have a constant turnover in staff or a high turnover in staff, it's hard on the schools, it's hard on the building principals, which relates to the new elementary school and the facilities, and you've got old buildings and small schools, and you've got, you know, a decent staff turnover. It's, you know, one teacher in one small school can make a difference as far as scores or accreditation. Which leads nicely to my second one, which is operational optimization, and this is in parentheses, realistically. You know, there's a lot to where, you know, the school division has a lot of older buildings, you know, small schools. We have convoluted bus routes, schedule issues, and, you know, admittedly, it would take an investment from the part of the city to, you know, you would be able to consolidate a couple schools, could rationalize the bus schedules and systems, and get some operational optimization and efficiency. Because right now, the school system's over-constrained from that standpoint. There's not just from an operational standpoint, but I'll address some of the educational issues. You know, we have a lot of expectations that are projected onto the school system. I mean, we're an appointed board. We could have a discussion as to which is more political, the school board or city council, because everybody's expectations get projected on. And when you have public education, everybody's got an opinion, and deservedly so. But then we're also constrained by the state in terms of funding, in terms of mandates, federal government as well, and then in terms of standards. Anyway, I feel better. Thank you.
So I had first staff salaries and then facilities. And on staff salaries, I know a lot's been said, and it obviously plays such a huge role in recruitment, retention, turnover. And I'd be really curious to know what the cost is for turnover, if we can put a number to what turnover costs us. Because there's no question that it's, I would imagine, a huge amount. I mean, just for my own business, how much does it cost to go out there and bring somebody in? And so are we thinking strategically about how we hire? And then, you know, sort of fundamentally, why would we expect somebody to come in every day and give their all for our students every single day without some sort of light on the horizon? What are you working towards? And why would we expect people to stay motivated consistently for years on end without some sort of expectation that they will be at least modestly rewarded for their efforts? I mean, the fact that our teachers have not received real wage increases in so many years, I think, is appalling. I mean, talking with, you know, a 20-year veteran of the school system, and he's making about $50,000, which is shocking and not appropriate given what we expect of our teachers. So I think it's huge. I think it's really important and critical that we address. And then on the facilities question, I think just like teacher salaries, we should expect that our teachers and faculty and staff and students come to work in the best facilities that we can provide them. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, and certainly it's going to require a lot of work and some sacrifice, but we should give them every opportunity to do their best work.
All right, I have two. First one, diverse faculty teacher shortage. And I first want to say to Marie G., thank you for the excellent job, the hours that we don't always show our appreciation for the excellent work that you do. It's a very difficult area. And of course, Governor Northam has acknowledged the teacher shortage crisis in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And legislation is constantly afloat around this. We've got two significant Steves, Steve Landis for the House Education Committee and Steve Newman for the Education Committee on the Senate side. It appears to me that we've got to take a hard look at this. The legislation that is coming forth is looking at changes to teacher licensure process, dealing with even giving local school boards or division superintendents an opportunity to waive certain licensure requirements for individuals who hold provisional license. So I think we're going to have to be creative, innovative, incentivize. There's a lot here. In some of our core areas, we really need teachers. I'll finally say on this, there's a debate whether or not you have to put in front of a student someone that looks like them in order for that student to learn. I reject that notion. I do not necessarily believe that the student ought to see someone in front of him or her that looks like the student. The teacher certainly has to relate. Now, however, I do believe when we talk about a diverse faculty, there is a great need for us to look at that, because maybe there are teachers in other places in our country that could come and help us, because whoever wrote this, I think that it is a real dynamic about looking at it. And our superintendent is right. I'm even being careful of my words as I speak about this. This is a real issue that has to be talked about. And when you talk about it, you can't label the messenger as being one way or the other. We have a problem with diverse faculty. It's hard to get men in the classroom. You need more African Americans in the classroom. And in our core areas, it's a hard area. So I think we need to start legislatively working a little harder and taking some bolder initiatives in that area. With the state of the art of the buildings, I agree with that, bringing the buildings up to date. Again, I want to thank Dr. Copeland. I don't know where he is. Oh, he's out. Well, you can't say I have not been complimentary in this meeting.
We'll make sure that's in the minutes.
All right, yes, ma'am. And so I tend to agree that great work is going on in advocating. Bo is right. We've got to do something about it. And in some instances, we even have the Office of Civil Rights with the review of Brown versus Board of Education in terms of each school division, making sure that buildings are up to speed. And so that's another tough one. I got two tough pieces that I just reported.
So I have two pretty easy pieces. One is salary and one is funding, since we've been through that a couple of times. But I just want to say that I've been on the board for 1 year, and I think the thing that I've been so impressed by in this 1 year is how enthusiastic, how giving, how amazing our staff are. And our teachers are obviously the main people we think about with staff, but other staff. But I've been fortunate enough to visit some of the schools, and you go into a classroom, you go into a hall room, and you see these teachers and these staff members who are just being so good and so kind and so challenging to the student. It's really pretty unbelievable. And I think that if we're going to maintain that, obviously teaching to me is somewhat like medicine. It's sort of a vocation. You don't go into it teaching particularly to make a lot of money. Medicine, you may do it for some reason for that. But for teaching, you go into it for what you give to those students. And I think that's what we see in our schools. But I do think we have to pay our teachers in order to recognize the fact of the challenges that they have. I mean, we are in an urban school system, which is very different from the surrounding counties. The needs and the challenges that our students face are much different than they see in other places. And I think that our teachers and our staff feel very strongly that being compensated, not that we're going to put them in a range that's going to be, put them in the physician salary or some high amount, but they just want to be compensated at a point that we say, we're recognizing you for what you're doing because you're doing a great job. And we've talked about this obviously on the board, and we plan to continue to do that. But one of the things that we keep talking about is the fact that the teachers relative to surrounding areas in other cities are on a lower scale, but our support staff too. I mean, our bus drivers are below the poverty level on their salaries. And that's despite the fact that several years ago under the school board direction, tried to increase those levels more than the teachers percentage-wise, just to get them up to a real range that's appropriate. So I think that if we're going to have successful schools, if we're going to have teachers who are going to be committed, who are going to stay, so we don't have to keep training them, we need to compensate them in an adequate way. And then last, I just have to make one comment regarding the expenditure per student in our school system compared to other school systems. We've had this information, and I'm sure that the City Council has it also, but if you look at similar cities such as Roanoke, Harrisonburg, Winchester, we all spend about $12,000 per student per year. That's all the same. Charlottesville spends $16,000. They get less state funding and more city funding because they're in a situation where their city can do that. So I think, our costs here are the same as equal cities. It's not more expensive, and we're trying to produce in an appropriate way. My other comment, my second one was, I think goes hand in hand with this, which is creating innovation and education, future design with changing future structures for funding. How can we do funding differently? I mean, we all know that the pool within the city, as far as our financial resources, are small, that there are other challenges before the city, there are a lot of challenges before the schools. What other ways can we come up with that will be innovative funding? Is there other ways that we can do it within the city, within the schools? We want to watch our budget, as Dr. Edwards has said. Do we need more partnership with private organizations, corporations who are willing to fund our educational system? Because I think that we do have a lot of partners down, that's another resource. So I think that looking at new ways to funding is very important for us. So we'll keep working on that. Thank you.
Thank you. The first note card, I'm not sure of the spelling, but I think what it says is our dire school facilities needs. And that has been discussed. We all know that we have some very modern, technologically advanced buildings and facilities, and then we have some more antiquated buildings that have been here for a good part of the 20th century. So the first obvious issue on that is that can translate into unequal and disparate educational opportunities for the students who have the best of the best and the students who are learning in an older facility. So it impacts the quality and the quality of our education. Second, of course, is that it deals with our budget. It costs more to maintain and operate an inefficient building and facilities than it does to operate, for the most part, operate a state-of-the-art building. So having those challenges not only creates the inequalities of the quality of education, but puts a drain on our budget if we could afford to upgrade appropriately. The second question is an obvious one, or the second comment is achievement gaps. And I think we've addressed that, but clearly there are lots of reasons for achievement gaps, and everybody wants to focus on their favorite target. But the first thing that we do need to deal with achievement gaps is what happens or did not happen, as the case may be, to the student before they ever got to kindergarten. The preschool readiness is essential to that student and every student's success. And some students are blessed with a very warm, encouraging, enriched educational structure in their homes and in their communities and churches and groups, and other children don't have those opportunities and those benefits. So and that's something I'm not sure the school division can do a lot about, but I hope the Bridges to Poverty initiative will in some significant way make an impact on that, so all of our children come to kindergarten ready, willing, and able to learn and make the most of what the school division is offering them and their families. Another major issue related to that, and somewhat a corollary to that, is the parental engagement. If we had not just parents, but community groups engaged in our schools, then that would translate to the students into education being valued and education being important. Everybody has a role model. Some of us have very good role models, and some of us have the misfortune of not having good role models. And today there are so many negative role models, whether it be in Hollywood or the media industries or even in Washington, that don't set a good tone for how you should behave and what you should aspire to and what you can be. And the negativity of those role models that are available to our children need to be overcome by the role models in our homes and with our parents and with our businesses and with our community groups and nonprofits. And then of course, the last element that deals with that, in my mind, the achievement gap, the breadth of the achievement gap, is of course the rigor of instruction. Some teachers are outstanding, and they are masters of their subject matter. They can manage a classroom, they are motivational, and they can utilize the facilities and the equipment and the resources they have available. And others, because of their youthfulness or their naivete or the lack of experience, don't have those resources. And that skill level of the teacher or the instructor translates directly into some opportunity that the student is going to miss until that teacher gets up to snuff. And so having an intensive ability to assess, evaluate, promote, and encourage professional development of teachers, and as Bo said, pay them enough to keep them around long enough so that they develop those skills, is going to translate, in my mind, into a reducing of the achievement gap.
My first one is related to raising staff and faculty salaries to at least market rate, and ideally for recruitment and retention or a little above. And I agree there should be some way to reward merit, higher performing instructors so that we do retain them. But we've talked a lot about that. And then this one's different. Increased focus on vocational and trade skills for non-college bound students. And even though my whole career has been in higher ed, I'd say this should go for everybody. Practical life skills, development of the person, the ability to do simple things that apparently a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds, at least the ones that come in as new freshmen, don't seem to know how to do anymore. But yeah, I like the opportunities for vocational and trade skills, and I hope that we never lose sight of that, because that is an important component. And I think it's these kind of things, rather than learning the equation of a line, which is actually how I make my living. But I remember in 8th grade thinking, why will I ever need this? It didn't seem relevant. But fixing a car, fixing a toaster oven, being able to repair something or build something or make something out of wood, those are practical things. And I think part of our achievement gap may be a misalignment between having the luxury of understanding, I don't know, cultural things as opposed to practical things. When you're hungry, you're watching your siblings because your parents aren't home, they're working. So I think that explains some of it. Oh. Okay, I have, guess what, facilities. I think this obviously is a really raised to the top of the pile here today. And I don't think there's much more I can say about that, except I know that we have some challenges in that area, and it's something that we really need to look at very seriously and start addressing. And the second one I have is one word, behavior. And Sharon touched on that just a little bit. I'm not in the classroom, so I'm not really there when this, but I hear so much out in the public about the teachers having so many behavioral issues just serious behavioral issues to deal with children today. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have increased cost per student too, because we have to hire special people to come in and help work through some of those behaviors. But that is a big issue, as I understand it, in our schools, and I think it's something that we need to figure out how we're going to address more effectively. So.
Okay. The two that I have, the first one is accreditation for all schools. This ties into student achievement. We have talked about that several times. Again, that is a crucial area that we need to continue to work for together. The second one I have is preparing all students for graduation and beyond workforce readiness, which is so crucial. Again, looking on the city council hat, we're always looking at economic development, make sure our cities are thriving. So one of our goals is to make sure businesses are happy, the businesses are relocating. We want to make sure that when we have businesses relocating, that we have a prepared workforce that are prepared for those new businesses. And also, the more businesses we have, the greater income we have in our community. And also, we do some of that poverty by giving higher, better wages. And also, one thing is people are moving into a city, they're looking for business opportunities, they're looking for schools that are accredited. So those two got to go hand in hand. As the city is thriving, our business is developing even stronger. You want to make sure you have a good business economy where the staff they're trying to hire are in that city, and also that the schools are great schools. They want to come and move here because of the great schools. So those are two great priorities.
Well, I only had one, so I added a second one. It was salary compensation for all employees, and it's been addressed around the board table. But I want to add that very tough decisions have to be made about how we fund the compensation for our employees. We can't do it all. We as a board have prioritized what our goals are, but we are also going to be willing to make those decisions, and we're committed to do that. The other one, my colleague Dr. Coleman spoke about, and I think we really need to take the opportunity to advocate for ourselves with our legislators. We do have funds out there, and James mentioned a couple. And I read this morning in the VSBA letter how Richmond School Board and city leaders were actually going as a group to meet with them, and that they were going to do some powerful presentations. And I think that's well within our means. My addition to this problem is for our schools, I think that what happens after school is the biggest challenge for our schools. We have them for a limited number of times. Where they go, what they have when they get there, what they're able to access, and where they feel safe significantly impacts what we are able to do for our students. And so for our students to be successful in school, we've got to address those hours outside of school as well.
Okay, that was great discussion. It took us a little longer than we had anticipated. So you're going to stay in your groups for the last question, and we're going to give you 10 minutes to talk about how can we work together to advance the city's legislative priority to fully fund the standards of quality, or SOQs, including staff support costs and categorical incentive funds for at-risk students, and restore funding from cuts to education over the last biennium. That question is listed on your agenda that you all have a copy of. So if you could just have a conversation within your group, choose somebody to report out on common themes, and then we can get dinner. To do short report outs on how you answered the question. We'll start over here with group 1, and I think it's Sterling or Susan are gonna
All right, we talked about the going as a group of city and school leaders to meet with our legislators, going to the committees that we know can give money and going in with a plan with, we just don't want more money, we need money for this, because if you don't know what you need, you're not going to get it. We also talked about advocating for ways to use money differently, like the lottery money, that we're not sure we're getting as much as we should, or could it be used in different ways? We talked about a lot of things. I'm not sure I covered it.
Okay, group 2.
This our group?
It is.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. In our discussion, we talked about the need for transparency to take place, so that's going to require conversation. We would like to recommend a subcommittee with school board members and council members to be appointed, because the governor is preparing his budget now. Now is the time to deal with the legislators around the issues that are going to encourage them in economic development and business development in Virginia, and to address that which city officials have identified. And we need to do that now. Those vigorous, direct conversations need to be taking place now with our local people, and we're proposing a subcommittee made up of school board members and council members to work together to begin that advocacy as soon as possible.
Thank you. Group 3.
So in thinking about the state, economic realities of the state right now, there's going to be a large influx of the state this year will have a significant amount of income coming in. I think it's pretty much a given that the governor is going to suggest an increase in funding for schools. The question is how much, and I think certainly lobbying the governor would certainly help. On the other side, you're going to have the General Assembly that is going to be pushing back against that spending and trying to, in an effort to raise the standard deductions to match the federal government. And they can't do that exactly this year. It'll happen to be next year, and this is this cash windfall that they're expecting to receive. So I think you'll see the governor wanting to push the envelope and increase the spending. The General Assembly is going to be pushing back. In that case, we're in a very nice position, because, as was pointed out earlier, Steve Newman is chair of Finance Committee, Scott Garrett's on Appropriation, and by the way, both of them sit on the conference committee, on the Budget Conference Committee. So I think, sure, we can go up and have presentations, but I think it's also pulling those two aside and having some quiet conversations and saying, look, we need to do this, and just try to get it done. Did I leave anything out? That's it. Okay.
Thank you. Group 4.
Thank you. We had a lot of robust conversation, and first thing I will say is Lynchburg City is going to the Capitol. So get ready, okay? Meet here with our legislatures, as we've said before, as Turner just said, and go to Richmond to their offices and walk through and talk to others who, because it's not just our leaders, there are other leaders that are on other committees as well that can hear our voices. I don't know if I talked about this with this group, but I did write a note down here. Take business leaders with us. Take business leaders with us, because the state is making significant investment on a twofold with our workforce, with our training and credential programs and process, but it has to start back in elementary, middle school, high school. So you don't just get those folks ready to come across the stage, ready to go into the programs, and they have to understand to invest dollars on that front end, you've got to invest more on the back end with us. And we have to ask the question, have the SOQs kept up with the reality of schools? Being on school board, I'm not sure what that ratio is now or if it's increased, but it did not. That's bare bones. That's not what's faced with the challenges, with the behaviors, with the funding needs that are there today, the mandated needs. So asking them, has it kept up with reality? And I think that was it. Getting the business leaders in the sense that we are building their talent pool. their human capital, that investment of their dollars in our city, and we need their assistance to help meet their outcomes and goals just as much as, you know, we want to go talk to the legislature. So how to better partner and invest with them in this mission. I think that's it.
Thank you. Just for a point of information, the Lynchburg City Council will be considering the legislative agenda on November 13th, and not very far thereafter. I will talk with Dr. Edwards and city and school leadership about our lobbying efforts with the General Assembly members, either here or in Richmond, or here and Richmond. So with that, I invite you to get your lunch and be back in your seats in 15 minutes. So back in February of 2017, there was a joint session between City Council and Lynchburg City School Board, and 4 priorities or ideas were created at that work session. There were some members of this group that were not there. So I want to recognize that Councilmember Wright, Dr. Gupta, Dr. Brennan, and Ms. Evans were not on the school board or council at that time. And so I just want to do a quick recap of what those ideas were that came out of that meeting. You all have a copy of this in the packets that were sent to you. The first idea was to create a culturally competent teachers program, which included a culturally competent early childhood program, personal interventions with students, teachers, and volunteers that would minimize discipline problems, create wraparound services to families of low-achieving students, identify families who need support, and erase the digital divide. The second idea was family support, a focus on family support, which included identifying root causes, creating community partnerships, providing professional development, talking about motivation and opportunities and mentoring. The third idea was to instill a culture of accountability at administration, staff, teacher, and student levels, and that included expecting accountability at all levels, treating students as individuals, not necessarily as a member of a group, focusing on education for all, engagement, identifying needs, being consistent in teaching subjects, and strong discipline. Then the fourth idea was community engagement, and that included engaging the community, obviously, finding ways to, innovative ways to inspire students, such things as adopting a school, adopting a student or a family to be involved in school, parental support, support for teachers, and teacher training. And when Dr. Edwards and I were preparing for this, this time together, there were 2 ideas that we thought there was more significant intersection between City Council and the school board, and perhaps our staffs. And those 2 opportunities for intersection were the family support idea and community engagement. So a lot of that was talked about as we went through our small group exercises, and Dr. Edwards will talk about what those intersections look like relative to the lovely wallpaper around the room. So with that, I will pass it on to Dr. Edwards.
Thank you. I'll start here, and if I have to jump up, I'll grab the wireless mic, but I don't know where it ran away to. But oh, okay. So one of the things that, as I was reviewing the 2017, February 2017 meeting recap, was to try to crosswalk the work that was already started with the work that we have begun. That's why you don't eat while you do this. The work that we've begun in terms of our strategic plan. So I wanted to take a couple moments to just, during the dinner hour, to kind of go over 3 of the 4 goals, just as an overview, and then the 4th one, we'll spend some time after dinner digging into a little bit deeper. What we did was we started with actually we started electronically collecting information from my staff about what would it look like 5 years from now? What kinds of conversations would we have regarding our students, regarding our staff, regarding our, fiscal resources, our facilities, and our community when we look back in time at our school system? What have we accomplished? What are we really excited about? Wow, it's great that we have either this new and innovative addition to our division, or we have finally solved whatever it is that was outstanding that we needed to solve, or we've eliminated something that was possibly maybe not the best for us, or at least going forward not the best for us. And we frame those questions under 4 key areas, and those are the areas, 3 of those key areas I want to just quickly go over with you and explain our decorative wallpaper. You have electronic copies of what's on the wall, but I also believe it's very important to bring the original documents out so that you can see the full magnitude of what people were thinking as we came up with this. So pretty much on this side of the room, there are 4 sheets, and you don't have to read them. I will kind of summarize them. 4 sheets that talk about what is our goal 1. And our goal 1 is all about student growth, development, and success. And that's from multiple lenses, from an academic lens, a socio-emotional lens, behavior, physical development, and mental health as well. And one of the things while you were doing your first 2 activities, the Post-it notes and also the cards in the bucket, as I was listening to that, I kept thinking, where does that fit in what we want to do for our kids? So much of what you talked about, behavior being one of them, would fit under our goal number 1 and what we want for kids. And what we want for kids is really to meet each kid by need, as we say, whatever that need is, and to have that child excel. In order to do that, it requires that we have several resources: human capital, physical resources. We also need perseverance, diligence. We, as the adults who work with the children, and I say that as the educators in the building, but also the community, we have to have that stick-to-itness for kids, especially when they don't want to stick to it. We have to be that sticky glue for them and really keep pressing forward. So part of the outcome today will be talking about what can we do in combined efforts to be that wraparound glue for our kids. But getting back to this, what you can anticipate coming out of this, and we will continue to have this conversation with our staff and our community on Community Conversation Day on December 10th, is a look at where do we need to be looking and what do we need to prioritize within a 5-year strategic plan for our students over those 5 years. So you'll see a multitude of things up there: gifted services, alternative education, trauma-informed practices in terms of our students. We talk about bullying as one of the things that we need to address. What about the kid in the middle, what I like to call the C-average kid who's just, I'm existing in classrooms. Sometimes the C-average kid can get lost if we pay a lot of attention to who's at risk and a lot of attention to who's gifted, and are we really pushing that child to his or her potential? With the promise from the Beacon of Hope, we have the promise that every kid has access to college, which is a very good thing, that we want our students to go beyond. But for some of our kids, that might not be right after graduation. What we really want for our kids is success after leaving Lynchburg City Schools. And success can be defined differently for different kids. And we need to recognize that as our educational institution, one of the things that's wrapped up in our first goal is, what does success look like for every child? And whether or not that's workforce development, whether or not that's going to college or the military or starting your own business, how do we prepare kids for that? And it might be more than one of those. It's not just a linear path. Some of our kids might go into college and realize, I'm not ready for that yet, I'm gonna go in the workforce, I might go back. So how do we prepare them for that? So as I looked at some of the things that were in your February 17th, or to February 7th, 2017 goal number 1, I see some of those same things up here in terms of what we want for our students. And I always joke that we have 2 types of learners, the little ones and the big ones. And the little ones are our kids, the big ones are our educators and our staff, because we're all learning. And we do recognize that in order for students to be successful, they must be meet, greet, and treat by adults who are ready and able to meet their needs and are accessible to students. And I say that to say, we focus on teenage and youth mental health. We also need to focus on that with the adults who work with the children. We focus on the learning environment for our students. We need to focus on learning environment for our staff. We focus on growth and development for our students and what's new, what's the 21st century, I don't even want to call it 21st century learning skills. It's just what you need to know now. Skills for our students, but we also need to focus on what are those skills our staff need as well. So that's why I said the big learners. So down on the other end of the wall, if you got a chance to look at the wallpaper, are all goals about growth, development, and success for personnel. And that's everybody who works with our children, from our bus drivers, custodians, teachers, assistants, the nurse, the secretary, everybody downtown. What is it that we need in terms of making sure that they are bringing their best selves to work every single day and giving the kids the absolute best that they deserve? And I say that to say, even if I work downtown and I work in payroll, if I do my job very, very well and I give good customer service to those who are working with the children, then the children also will benefit from that good customer service. So it does matter, not just for the teachers, but for everybody on our staff. And we are looking at, one of the things is customer service. How do we become a very customer friendly, and customers, we are each other's customers as well. How do we do that for our staff? How do we do that with our families and community and each other to make sure that we are providing students with the absolute excellence? So you'll see a big investment in that. Of course, you've already tied into some of that is the compensation. That has been a big topic of conversation. One of the things I did not hear as much today, but did come up before, is professional development for our staff. And that's in a wide variety of things that they may need, similar to what our students need, whether that's, and I like to say professional development that goes beyond awareness, because you just don't want to send people to workshops and you don't want awareness, you actually want habits. So you'll hear me talk about equity habits, academic habits, and that's where I actually went to a workshop, I learned something, and I am purposeful in my implementation of those strategies, not just saying, I'm aware that, you know, there are different cultures in my classroom. You'll actually see that in my planning for instruction. So those are those habits that we're trying to develop within our staff. So you will see that in our second goal. And we do talk a lot about recruitment. I think diversity was something that was mentioned here. And Dr. Coleman, I will echo your statement that you don't necessarily need to match your student demographics and your teacher or staff demographics, but what you do need for our kids are high quality personnel that are reflective of them and their culture. The last thing I would want is for all of my little brown boys and brown girls to think that, well, you know what, the only jobs for me might be just the assistant or the custodial or the bus driver. No, they need to see the principal, the superintendent, they need to see the mayor, city council, the owner of the business down the street, and that's for all of our children. They need to be able to aspire to what might not even be what's around them in their own home. So it's up to us to make sure that we provide them with those opportunities and also help them with that. So you will see a lot of that in our goal number 2. It's all about our people and really keeping people. And I think it was Bo, you talked about the cost of turnover. I was like, oh, I want that number 2. What is the cost of turnover? It is very costly to train folks and then have them leave within a year or 2. And then you have to train new folks, develop new relationships, get new habits together. And it's just not an effective way to do it. So we want to hire good quality staff and keep them here as long as we possibly can for the benefit of our children. So that was a really good, important point that you made. And then finally, the third goal over there in the corner behind Mrs. G, goal number 3 talks about our fiscal responsibility, and that's everything from how we manage our folks to how we manage our money to how we manage our facilities. And Jeff, I'm speaking your language right now because I know that's one area that we've talked about extensively. And for me, when it comes to spending, I do this in my own home. I say, well, just because we can spend doesn't mean we should spend. And there has to be a good rationale behind those dollars and that investment. And what's the turn on that investment? Was it a good investment? But I also know, some things are just costly. And sometimes some of our children require a significant investment in them in order for them to grow and develop. So I'm very mindful of that and making sure that I meet those needs as well as the needs of other students. In our discussion earlier was a lot of talk about facilities, so that's in our plan over there. We're looking at long-range planning in our facilities and making sure that we not only plan for the future, but how do we plan for regular ongoing maintenance. If you own a home or anything, you think about that all the time. At some point, this water heater might be 25 years old. It might go. Am I ready? Am I prepared? Do I have resources? We think the same in terms of our schools and getting ready. So you'll see a lot on that in terms of that. But I thought it was important to just take a moment to crosswalk where you were and where we're going, and also ask you, before we get to community engagement, which is the bigger piece, if there were any questions about anything that you received or anything that you've seen up here or any of that. So I want to take a quick question before we move on.
Just one thing, the last item that you mentioned as far as the keeping up with the buildings and whatnot, those buildings are actually, all the school buildings are owned by the city of Lynchburg as opposed to the school system. So with that may be something to try to figure out a better way of implementation, of maintenance, of long-term planning, more on the city side if there's, duplication, since it's the city buildings. And I realize historically the schools have taken care of the buildings and requested for roofs and part of their planning. That may be something to coordinate, with our city finance folks as far as more of a, rather than having duplication of effort where you have somebody that's in charge of the buildings that you don't own. Typically you don't have people that are in charge of buildings that you're renting. Or just simply utilizing. So that may be something, I don't know if there's any discussions about that, but I think that may be something to, I realize it's different, but that may be a way to look at something a little bit differently.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Bonnie, is that something that,
Yeah, I think we actually, Ben works with our procurement folks, and we try and quote roof replacement collectively rather than in silos. Am I right on that, Ben?
Work very closely with the purchasing department and with the finance department on all of the planning.
I guess I'd like not just on something, I guess procurement may be something a little smaller when you're buying a roof or whatnot, but I mean, when you're having the capital improvement plan like we have with the city, I mean, that's one of our buildings, and that, maybe those things could be looked at a little more in depth rather than just simply combining procurement kind of thing.
Any other questions on that before I get to community engagement and family engagement? Doing my wait time. Okay. All right, so we are shifting into what would be our goal 4, and as Bonnie called out from your February 2017 meeting, the family support and community engagement goals. In our 4th goal, which is behind Dr. Brennan, those 4 sheets back there really dictates both community engagement and what was important for us to also say involvement. And we recognize that sometimes communication out to the community, this is what we're doing, hey, we're having an event, come show up, could be masked for involvement, when that is a form of involvement, but that's not the only form of involvement. The type that we are really seeking and looking for that we think will be beneficial for our kids is anything that's going to help really move the needle. And I say that to say I appreciate when everybody shows up for, you know, athletic events or the strings program, but what are we doing as a community to really help our students and their families? And probably one of the bigger things over there, I'll just mention a couple things in terms of resources, seeking more grants, our partnerships with local businesses, colleges, and so on. But on the third sheet, there are three numbers, 7, 8, 9, and you may have heard me speak about this before, but I think it's worth taking pause to really explain what that means in terms of how we view the life of a child during the school year. So during the school year, children are with us for about 7 hours a day, and we hope that they're getting 8 hours of sleep. Now, we know for some that's not true, but that would be the ideal, that they're actually getting 8 hours of sleep, which means in a 24-hour day for a child during the school year, there are 9 additional hours that this child spends with mom, dad, family, community, could be shelter, could be aunt, grandma, uncle, or could be in the street. You know, it's very different for very different children. And that's the area of intersection where we really are like, okay, going back to what you said, Jeff, in terms of pooling the resources, what can we do together to really help children? And if I, give you a little story of a kid who may come to school early in the morning, not ready to learn yet, perhaps sleepy, didn't get sleep at night, didn't have breakfast, so we feed the child breakfast, we get them motivated, get them ready, work on alertness so that by the time, maybe reading was first thing in the morning, so we might not have gotten to that one, so maybe we're at math now. Definitely the physical activity, to get the child engaged in learning. Usually by the end of the day, we're there, and we're sending the child back home. We don't know what we're sending them home to in some cases, and then what we get the next day actually might be a repeat of what we just went through. Sometimes that's great because children go home, they have wonderful families, absolute wonderful experiences from the time they leave us to the time they return the next day, and for some of our kids, not so much. But we don't get to pick which ones come to our schools. They all come, so we have to help them all. So for the ones who we are really very concerned about, and even ones who we think, we talked about gaps. Well, what about the opportunity gaps? For some of our students, even getting a job might be easy if you're in a family where there are family members who can employ you. Whereas other students, it might not be so easy to get employment, or they may not have those connections. So what can we do to reduce those gaps? So what I'd like to do during this part of the retreat is pull our brains together, and Trinae and I have talked about this so a little bit in terms of just the workforce. If we just look at children, and I'm talking high school, middle school, and if we really are serious about every child by name and by need, and we know that we want our children to have a skill set, but we also want them to be employable so that they can sustain themselves and their families, what does that look like in our community? So what kind of services can we provide for students who want to enter the workforce? What is out there? What can the city work with us on? How can we partner? And we recognize we have some hurdles. We have FERPA, which is all the student information and sharing. And we're willing to look at those challenges in a different light if we have some way to really help our kids. And let me talk about children. Children are not going to say, well, there's a website that lists everything. Just go to the website and you go find out. That's not my kids. I wish it was, because life would be easy, but it's not. And if we're serious about doing the work is tiring and the work is hard. And sometimes the work feels like, wow, is it even appreciated until you get to the outcome? And all children generally have that. I'm gonna look at you until I can figure out whether or not I can trust you. And trust comes with you're constantly coming back. So for some of our kids, saying that there is a website that you could go to and you could get this skill is not gonna be enough. Who is that champion that's gonna help that kid access that? Some of my children don't have transportation. Are there things we could be doing together that says, well, if you have kids who need to get to Job Corps or workforce development or other avenues, here's how we can do that. Uber made it happen somehow. They transport people all over the place. Can we transport children differently? So this is where I need some serious out-of-the-box thinking about if I have a population of children that I want to access some skill level. And what I heard from the economic development and tourism is that there are jobs available. So we have another gap between here are the jobs and here are the skills. So how do we connect our kids so that they can fill these jobs right here in Lynchburg? And what is it that we need to do as a community to make that happen and what's available? So I want to spend some time picking your brain, because I've only been down here for 6 months to know a few things, and I'm glad to see human resources here and family services here as well, because in addition to what we can do for our kids, imagine what can we do for the families. So if I do have a child who's going home to a house that needs assistance, and the child is trying, child comes to school every day, but is trying, how can I get assistance to that family? And again, saying there's a website that you could fill out a piece of paper and possibly get some service might not be the answer. I need boots on the ground. So I want us to have a frank conversation in small groups, and you can actually do it in the little corners that we're in, that talks about what is available for our students in the city, what is available for our families in the city, and I might have to invite the folks in the back to join too, and how can we connect those resources. So we're gonna take a little bit of time in small group, and I think we had two, is this the other posters that we had, which are somewhere, I don't know where they are now. Okay, they're not hanging, all right. And we wanna get those ideas up because I'm willing to meet with whoever I have to explore whatever I have to do to make sure that we really seriously look at and beyond, and make sure that we stop talking about what we can do for kids and we actually connect resources and start doing what we can do for kids. And if we're very serious about, giving them a skill set or giving them an opportunity, then how do we make that happen? And I know everything we need is already in this town. I just need to know how to connect it. And most of you I've talked to about that. So you're like, oh yeah, but now what we need is the actual action and pathways. How do we get there and how do we make that happen? Okay, all right, so group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4, just a short chat right now about what resources are available for students, and I'm thinking more for the workforce piece, and then families, and I'm thinking all the support pieces that my families need in terms of that. Ready? Okay. Time for the share part of this. So one of the things I asked you was just to really have a deep conversation about services for our kids and our families that are outside of our schools that we can connect to our schools to help with those other 9 hours during the school year. We recognize during the summer it might even be more than that. So I'm going to start with this group on this side who are going to town because they use 4 sheets of paper. So I'm going to let them start up. Anybody on this side who wants to speak?
I'll start.
Here, you want?
Turner, let's give him a hand. Okay, we tried to tackle the main areas about community resources, about like economic development for families, but those 2 main resources. So for services to students, what we were saying was connect students to various community centers, critical communication with the teachers in the schools. So again, making sure that during those hours when they're out of school, that we connect them with those schools and those community centers in those areas. So we talked about maybe possibly doing a mapping to see what community centers or resources are in those neighborhoods where the kids go to. If you live in a James Crossing, go to like a Jubilee, or if you live in Daniels Hill, go to the Daniels Hill Community Center, or if you live in College Hill, go to maybe College Hill Community Center or Boys and Girls Club. So doing a mapping so the schools are aware of all the resources in the community so they connect the kids with those different resources. And then the school system connected with those agencies, community centers, so we can kind of partner even more together. They've had some workshops in the past. Well, they've done some sharing of ideas as far as teaching and tutoring children. So more events like that, and then more resources that we can talk to our kids more about their homework assignments. Give them the access to the Google Classroom or where they have where the homework is or whatever. Make sure those community centers have the homework assignments so they can better utilize those with our children. And also with this too as well, as the teachers develop more, they know more about the issue with the kids and the community centers. So partnering together, developing stronger relationships, they would know what issues the kids may be having, whether it be food issues, maybe home issues, maybe living issues. As they develop more, our school system would know more about resources. So having some professional development issues programs where our teachers and schools would know about what community centers are there, what resource they're offering, whether it's using 211 or whatever the case may be, that our teachers are aware of all the resources so they can better help our children in their needs. And then we talked about, this is that group there. So they'll talk about that in a second. Getting to, I was like, what is that? Getting to services for families. Again, make sure the families are aware of resources in the area. A lot of times families just don't know. So make sure they're aware of the resources in the area through communication. Teachers' awareness of needs for families. Again, as teachers develop relationship with our kids, they know about resources that they need. Businesses, one thing we talked about is a resource for families. We always talk about connecting our family with different opportunities. So we're saying connecting our families also with the bridges, connect with bridges to progress. So connecting our families to those subgroups, because those subgroups have a lot of issues, have a lot of programs that they can utilize, such as transportation areas, career development areas, housing areas. So a lot of areas in that Bridges program where our families, our school system can utilize. So make sure that our teachers are aware of that so they can kind of refer the families to those areas for support. And one thing we talked about was businesses. We attended an event at CBCC where our local businesses in our community talked about their needs and what they needed for employment, how they have like 80 positions open right now for welders, but they don't have enough people to fill those positions. So to make sure that our families are aware of that. Our school system is aware of that, partnering with our businesses. So whether we're doing an event with our school system, it's kind of getting off target a little bit, but it kind of still affects the families. So the school system is sponsored with our local businesses where they get a roundtable with our businesses, hearing what our businesses need, what career resources are short in our community, and how our schools can better affect those needs as far as welding or whatever. Listen to our business community. What else? What is this again? Continuity of communication, families and teachers. So Sharon was going to mention that piece.
That's just to make sure that there aren't any gaps in communications. A lot of times families are nervous or afraid to share some needs. There are so many children that are caregivers, and it's not to a certain area code. There is amazing how many children care for their parents or cousins or uncles, or babysit so that their family members can care for someone else. And a lot of times the families will not share how much they depend on the children, and the children are not going to be willing to share because they don't want to be taken away or CPS, a Child Protective Service, to get involved. So if we can find a way to support those children and the families, and a lot of times it's difficult, but if you see the child coming to school maybe with soiled clothing, truancy, then we really need to look closer and see how we can support them without the fear of them being taken away. And it's always said, but Child Protective Services can also provide supports.
And the last quick piece we talked about was the Career Tech program, and just making sure that all of our children are aware of the Career Tech programs as well as their parents. So maybe doing kind of a seminar in the daytime in our schools, not just targeting certain kids because of where you live or your racial makeup, but targeting all of our children, our school system, let them be aware of our Career Tech programs, and doing a similar thing also for our parents so they can be aware as well. That's our part. And then we hand off to this group here. Councilman Wright.
So we only, I don't know if y'all can hear me. Can y'all hear me all right? I don't know if it's working. So we only had 2 items, and on the services for students, we talked a great deal about a mentoring program for pre-K through 12th grade, so about 12 and a half years of a child's life. And I only learned just now that it's not Portland, Maine, it's Portland, Oregon, but similar to Friends of the Children, which is a national nonprofit dedicated to breaking the cycle of poverty by assigning a paid mentor to students that are identified using certain metrics. And this person stays with them throughout their educational experience, ensuring that they develop in, they say, 9 core researched areas of childhood social and emotional development. So perhaps something like that. I don't know how we might tailor it to our purposes, but something akin to that. And then for services for families, we had, and this also applies to students as well, but a centralized transportation sort of hub for the community. And I know Dr. Jay Salmon has been working on developing an app similar to this. I think we've all heard a lot, some of it have heard about it, which is really impressive. And it's obviously supposed to provide no-cost transportation options for families and for students, especially students who have jobs. Similar to an Uber, but without the sort of cost component.
Right. Supportive.
And as far as Dr. Salmon is aware, this is sort of the first app like it under development in the country. So Lynchburg has the option to really be a petri dish for something like this. So it doesn't obviously have to be that, but some sort of place where transportation options are centralized for folks to use.
The other thing I'd like to add about Friends of the Children program, they're now in their 25th year, and they have had just tremendous success. And that, it's just a one-on-one program all the way through, and you wouldn't believe the results. I mean, their graduation rate is now like in the high 90s. Teen pregnancy is almost unheard of, and it's just an amazing program that need the resources to do it. Thank you. Good job.
Well, somehow we mostly got fixated on work readiness, workforce readiness, and talking the issue of learning the soft skills required of work. And so there was this notion of you can hire for character because you can teach the skills, especially in respect to manual labor and a lot of kind of workforce things students would be doing right out of high school. And then we talked about, well, what's available to help with that job readiness for high school students, and programs like Scouts, Awana through churches and things like that, that have character building, skill building, achievement as part of their process. And the nice thing is it helps with that time when students aren't in school, and gives them a place to go and something productive to do. And then we thought, talking about how to get students to think forward and think to the future, to plan out their future, because at least my perception is a lot of the discipline things we see, the serious ones, it's students who it seemed like they didn't feel like they had anything they were risking by engaging in risky behavior, because there's not really thinking of a future. So if there were job shadowing or internships or some kind of mentoring like that, it might expose young people to the full array of opportunities that are out there. So, of course, that would have to be a community partnership with all our businesses and industries here. Then it, obviously wouldn't be available to all students, but it could be something that we could try. And that's about all we came up with.
Well, you can see. Now, we were talking about a number of things. I wrote them down before we put them up there, and then as we saw that board was being pretty prolifically developed, we compared our notes and we had pretty much the identical information. So in order to care for your time, we're not going to need to repeat all of that. One thing that did come up, and it's a variation on theme to what's up there, and that is that many high school students, particularly high school students, who are not pursuing a college-bound curriculum probably don't feel the sense of pride and value in the general degree in the same sense that those who are going to be going to college, getting a scholarship, and having a lot of applause over their academic excellence. And that translates into a number of students feeling not real good about themselves and what they're doing. And I think if we make a concerted effort to place a value and place a significance on that general degree, particularly in a student who's pursuing vocational trade skills, which this city and this country needs dearly, that will be an invitation to have students want to find a place in the community post-graduation where they can translate those skills that they learned in their high schools and give back to themselves and their families. So that's just a component about placing higher value on the general degree.
Yeah, I guess the takeaway for me on this was more on the career tech side for services for students. And is there a good connection with the career tech staff, teachers, and links to local businesses? I don't know how well we're doing there, and maybe that's an area that needs to be developed, and so that the kids in high school can see that there's jobs, and there's certification programs that do lead to opportunities. But when you talk about some of the other trades too, it's not. I know they got a really good buildings trades program and kids, but I think maybe an area we need to emphasize a little more and work with local businesses. My discussions with some local business owners is it's not the skills so much, it's the work ethic. That the kids come out, show up on time, they work, they work 8-10 hours, they do what needs to be done. And I mean, and that's a hard thing for the school system to teach, but it's something that we can certainly support. As far as the services for families, it's to me, at least in I think our group, there's a lot of services in Lynchburg that are available, and the issues of coordination and getting the word out that this is available, and the jobs and the services, you got to get the people the families, the students have to get there. So transportation's a big issue. So depending on where you live in the city, you might have a job, but you can't get to it. Anyway.
One more comment related to that. Business and community outreach to allow our vocational skills to find a reality in employment is so important. And we do have, I don't know how long it's been going on, but it's called Lynchburg, where sophomores go to college campuses and they can visualize themselves maybe being on that campus and being a student. Why can't we do the same thing with businesses? So student who has some aptitude or interest can actually visualize the building that they may work in one day, or the type of things they're going to be doing, to give some tangible reality to their interest and aptitudes in the same way that we do for college students.
Great idea.
I read an interesting article in one of our school board journals, and it addressed a career signing day for celebration, the same way we do college and athletics. And they made a big deal out of it. They had the employer there, they had the student, they had the parents, they had them sign, and it was very, very successful, and I'm sure not very expensive. So I think that is something to celebrate the success of someone moving forward, is something that could be done pretty easily.
That conversation actually has occurred between economic development and the school board, or school superintendent.
Any other comments? We shift.
They wouldn't let me in a group.
What'd you say?
They wouldn't let me in a group.
You are a group all to yourself.
I got blocked out. 4, 4, 4. They kept to numbers. But I know. I walked around. So we're good.
So I think the next steps for us, as I said, with a lot of what I heard I was going to say in the morning, it feels like we've been here for morning, earlier, and even right now, is taking these concepts and now how do we put them into actual action? And I think for the school system, as we look forward to our strategic plan, it's pulling this off the charts and now putting it actually into an action plan that's easy to follow and people can see themselves in that plan. I like the idea of the business, seeing yourself in the business. And actually, Bonnie and I were sitting here talking about the soft skills and how do we not wait until we've graduated students to start working on that? And is it possible while we take some of our high school and middle school students and give them these work experiences while combining coming back to school and now talking about how do you balance your time? How do you wake up? Okay, now it's winter, so what I do in the summer to get to work might be different than what I do in the winter to get to work, because I have to anticipate traffic, and just saying it snowed is not a good enough not a good enough excuse for a business. How do you even call out for a sick day? When do you call out for a sick day? Those skills that just talk about the operationalizing the work, so to speak, for our students are very important. And it's something we can kind of teach in the classroom, but if you're actually on a job, and I know I've talked to Casey Crabb a little bit about just some of her students that work and some of the conversations she has about, okay, you have a part-time job, so let's talk about the skills you need to be successful at this part-time job. So those are some of the things that we're looking forward to pushing forward with our kids. So thank you. And time,
This has really been a very good conversation, particularly in my group, and I agree with the soft skills. I'm just wondering, philosophically speaking, and this is probably not the place, but I won't stick it in here because it may not be another place to say it. I like how we have our theme that the city talks about, city manager, mayor, and others, about live and play and all of that. I'm wondering what would be the possibility of adding learn to that? Because, when we talk about challenging environments, they exist. The soft skills, what we're trying to do for workforce readiness, just seems like to me, if we're really serious about connecting all of those dots, learning is essential to that happening. And there's certain types of learning that's just not happening, and the schools can't do it by themselves. So I'm finished.
That's your parking lot question that we live. Okay, got it. You didn't get yellow carded on that one. So. Good call. But we got it. Okay. All right. Time. The last part before we get to our closure is we're going to ask Dr. Copeland to come over and come up and take us into a little bit of long-range facilities planning for schools.
I'm going to use the podium, actually.
Oh,
That way
okay.
I can
There you go.
So I've got 55 minutes. Test, test. There we go. So from a facilities perspective, you need to look at renewal, renovation, and replacement. All of the buildings that you own, no matter if you're a homeowner, a school division, or a city, you've got to renew your building. That's things like upgrading your lights, your paint, your floor coverings, things like that on a regular basis. It makes it look warm and welcoming. You've got to renovate your buildings. You've got to replace your HVAC. You've got to replace your boilers. You've got to upgrade your electrical systems. You've got to do those major overhauls. And then you've got to, in many times, as your buildings age out, or your population grows, or your population shifts, you have to look at building additions, or you have to look at renovations. Okay, so when you look at things from a long-range facility plan, 4 things you need to consider are: you need to avoid the practice of running your equipment till it fails. If you do that, 2 things are going to bite you. You're not going to control when it's going to happen. It's going to be impossible to manage. And anytime that you have a crisis, you're going to pay more for that repair than you would have paid if you replaced it at its normal end of a life cycle. You've got to be able to fix and replace your equipment and your major systems before they reach their life expectancy. If not, you enter that gambling period, and I'll just give a couple of examples of that. 4 years ago, we had a boiler at Dunbar that failed. We got lucky that the boiler failed in March and not November. So we were able to use our reserve maintenance money to replace that boiler over the summertime versus having to go through an emergency boiler placed on site to provide heating. At Paul Monroe Elementary, we had a chiller that failed in May, and we were able to replace it over the summer. So when you push your equipment that hard for that long, at some point you're going to get unlucky, and you're going to have to pay for that. So here's where the meat of it sits. You've got to really develop a renewals and major renovation plan. So school divisions that have large investments in capital equipment and buildings, of which we have 1.7 million square feet just in the school system, they have plans that they've articulated that every 7 years they will do this. If you open a building, and I'll use Heritage High School, they know what they're going to do at 7 years. It's already mapped out. They know what that's going to cost them. They know it needs to be in the budget at that time. They know what's planned for 15 years. They know what the major renovation is going to be at 25, and then they start that 7, 15, 25 cycle again. Their hope is that they can continue to maintain those buildings as long as the structure remains sound for a very long time. The National Building Research Board says that to do that effectively, you need to budget somewhere between 2 and 4% of the replacement value of your buildings. Our insurance value, which is probably not the full replacement value, sits around $380 million. For Lynchburg City Schools, just using the mid estimate of 3%, that should be roughly $11 million that we should be looking at to do kind of our major maintenance and our renovation work every year. I understand the financial situations. Even if we were to look at just half of that, that's $5.7 million. In the 7 years that I've been with the city, the highest capital improvement amount, short of Heritage, Heritage is different, I'll talk about that in a second, the highest amount of capital improvement money has been roughly $3 million that we've seen to do this. It normally averages between 1 and 2. So that goes back to the second thing. We've got a lot of equipment and systems out there that have been pushed beyond their normal life expectancy. So, to talk about Heritage real quick for a second. If you get into facility replacement, that money is not part of that $11 million I mentioned earlier, because that's a full building replacement, and that normally requires a fairly significant bond campaign like we experienced here. What I'm trying to get to with all of that is that we've got buildings that date from the 1920s. It's a big, beautiful building, and it sits on the hill on 12th Street. R.S. Payne can continue to be a big, beautiful building. But a lot of these big, beautiful buildings were renovated in the 90s to put air conditioning in them. And they are currently running on that original air conditioning equipment from the 90s. It should have been replaced. We've got some of that in the CIP. One of the projects that we're hoping to get approved would be replacing some of the unit ventilators at Dunbar Middle School. Okay? Lynchburg City Schools' old buildings were not air-conditioned buildings. They have all had air conditioning added to them, this building being one of those. To give you a point of comparison, there's 384,000 square feet in this building. So this one building accounts for a significant portion of the 1.7 million that makes up the school division. All of this gets to, if you're going to provide education for students and really thinking 2020 and beyond, you've got to provide facilities that are educationally adequate. One of the big things that you'll see in new buildings, and if you've been through Heritage High School, compare that to Lincoln Middle School, is a lot of daylighting. There's much research out there that daylighting in an educational facility improves student performance. So when you build a new building, you're able to take something like an R.S. Payne or a Sandusky, or just pick any building that might be your favorite one, and you're able to bring it to the current educational standards to support learning for 2020 and beyond, provide that daylighting, provide more consistency in the environmental controls, because how many of you have been in a house when your air conditioning goes out? It's miserable for a certain time frame, or when you lost power during a tornado or derecho or anything like that. Imagine a school that's old, that isn't very well insulated, and it loses its air conditioning at about lunchtime, and the kids don't go home until 3:35. So it gets a little hot in August or September in some of our buildings when that happens. So if you think about those areas, we need to progress out of the practice of running to failure. We need to ensure that we replace systems that are beyond their current life expectancy so we can truly get to a renewal and renovation plan that's sustainable over the long term to provide the facilities that we need. So one of those facilities that's out there that I have talked to you about for many years, and we will hopefully start to design here this winter, is Sandusky Elementary School. So the current building is 47,000 square feet for about 350 students. The proposed new building would be somewhere around 90,000 square feet for approximately 600 students. So the new school provides the opportunity to look at what the best instructional practices are that are being used and design those into the building. If you look at R.S. Payne, or you look at this building, or most school buildings that were built prior to the 1990s, they are either an open concept classroom building, or they are a series of double-loaded corridors, double boxes. Classroom on this side, classroom on that side. It's big and square. You line up 25 students, 35 students. You put them in rows. That's about all the room you have. You don't have the ability to do collaboration. You don't have the ability to do a lot of the instructional practices that we know are successful right now. So a new building, just like we did in Heritage, allows you to look at all those instructional practices. It allows you to look at adequate daylighting. The larger capacity brings with it better efficiency, which is what we're all looking for. It does bring with it the ability to look at school zoning in the area of the areas of the city that might touch that current school zone. It may be possible to consolidate a smaller elementary school into the new school. Okay? There is some savings if you look at consolidation, but don't necessarily look that you're going to gain all of those teachers. Okay? The efficiency in a consolidation comes from the principal's position, the nurse position, the guidance counselor, things like that. The teachers are really needed because you're just picking up those students and moving them somewhere else. There might be a teacher savings here or there in a grade level, but normally you wouldn't see that. But don't think that if we build a new school, we'd necessarily take a school and remove it from operating or remove it from the inventory per se. because as we've seen with the Poverty to Progress move and all the other discussions around the city that started before that, the bridges discussion and the other discussions that Mr. Vanderwerker even had before that, everyone in this room knows that we have children with significant challenges. Our alternative ed program for our middle and high school kids, well, more specifically our high school kids, operates really on a half-day schedule because of the number of children they have to service. The secondary program starts the year at around 72 kids, that's middle and high school, the majority being high school, and ends the year at around 112 kids. Of those, 80% of them are high school kids, 20% of them are middle school kids. The only way we can accommodate it is they come for half-day programming. To educate those children adequately, they really need a three-quarter or a full-day program. You could tie in some of the stuff you've already talked about CTE and job preparation and soft skills and those types of things, because those children need something when they finish high school if you can get them to finish high school. So if you take a building that's no longer going to be an elementary school, you may very well need to use that to provide adequate alternative education services. The needs have grown significantly for our middle school and high school children, and we've seen a significant growth in our number of elementary age children. And folks, I'm talking kindergartners and first graders that are in alternative education because they can't handle the regimen of the school, or the issues that come from home are so significant. We have to provide more resources. Resources really for us is space that provides educationally adequate facilities to help service all of these growing needs. It used to be that alternative education was a transition approach. Child did something wrong at EC Glass, they go to Fort Hill, they stay for a semester, they figure out that they don't like it there and they want to go back to EC Glass because they want to play basketball, and then they transition back. Now, the majority of the kids that go into an alternative education setting stay there. And it's up to that alternative education school and those wonderful teachers to get that child to graduation. If those children are not transitioning back and they really are going to be permanent residents of that other school, then the resources provided to them need to be expanded. And then, you know, as everybody knows, the school zones in this city are one of the most fragmented things. We've got kids from James Crossing going all the way out to Heritage Elementary School. We've got kids in the downtown cluster that go to 4 different elementary schools. We all know that that needs to be looked at. But if you do that and you don't have an increased capacity anywhere else, you're just shuffling kids around to make families mad. Zoning is a very emotional experience for families. The first school division I worked for after retiring from the Marine Corps, every year I had to rezone, and I had to rezone because of growth, because I opened a high school, I opened an elementary school, I opened a middle school. Every year was opening a new school. And when you have to rezone families that they've been going to this elementary school, and it was, you know, the neighborhood out there had 1,000 homes in it, but that was in their neighborhood, and now you have to send half of that neighborhood to another one because that school has grown beyond capacity. It's a very emotional experience. I suspect it will be a very emotional experience for families here in Lynchburg. There's no way around it. So I've said it to the school board and for the city council that are here, you don't want to enter a rezoning discussion until you have a significant trigger that's causing you to do that. If not, you're just going to upset a lot of people. So a new or expanded capacity elementary school gives you the ability to rip off the Band-Aid of a few of these things and to start fixing them so that kids that live in College Hill, when they move from one side of the street to the other side of the street, they don't really have to move elementary schools, where now they do. And that's the apartments right down there below the fire station. There are 3 schools that those kids attend, and it happens every week. They move from one side to the other, and they end up getting moved. So I think I got us back on schedule. That's the gist of really the long-range facilities plan is you've got to get to where all of this stuff is forecasted and funded to be able to manage this effectively. You don't let people drive over a bridge until it collapses. You replace it at some point before that happens. That same philosophy needs to be approached with everything that we have in the city. And I understand it's challenging. I just am making my pitch for, I'd love to be able to map this out for the next 25 years so that you knew exactly when Heritage is going to get this replaced, when the lockers are going to be replaced, when we're going to repaint it, when we're going to replace the chillers, those types of things. In the long run, make it very easy, make it easier to manage your future financial obligations. I don't know that it would ever be very easy. So thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. As always, very, very thorough and informative and concise. Just a quick question about maintenance schedules. So I understand the need for HVAC. I just replaced a large chiller somewhere, and my costs have dropped substantially. Do you have any metrics about, and you don't have to give me the specific details, but just in general, do you have metrics for repair costs and utility costs for specific units or specific HVAC needs around the system?
We haven't done enough HVAC. The one that I do have fairly decent cost averages on are roof replacements, but we've really only done the one chiller. All the other stuff we've done with chillers has been life cycle extensions.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. One of the things I noticed is my cost of ownership for the chiller kept going up and up and up and up. And finally, I bit the bullet. Do you have that historical cost of repair?
No, we've got it in our work order system. So
Okay.
I'll have them start pulling some of that.
I'm just kind of curious because that was an easy justification for me when I saw how much it was costing me to maintain and Band-Aid the thing.
Yes, some of these older buildings, because of the way that they're designed, one chiller plant doesn't serve Dunbar Middle School because it's really 3 different buildings connected by hallways. So one's, I think the main building's on a chiller and others might be on rooftop units. But we know where our problem chillers are and we can look and capture that cost.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Copeland? Oh, Dr. Coleman, sorry.
I was thinking Councilman Higginson had a question, but he doesn't appear to have one. That's good. I just want to thank you, Dr. Copeland, for your presentation and the efficiency and effectiveness of the of the school division. We need these buildings and we need these things, and so I'm just so grateful to hear the report and hope that we can all work together to get it done.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, we are at closure and next steps. We have been here for a half-day retreat this evening. This has been 4 hours, in my opinion, well spent. And I'll turn to Ms. Morrison, and I'll let you, if you have any comments that you would like to say, and then I'll close us out.
I'd like to thank everyone for being here and for participating and coming up with some really great ideas. I know that there's not a single person sitting at this table that's not want what's best for kids. And it's encouraging to have this kind of dialogue. And I appreciate the work of the staff that put this together. And I'm looking forward to the next step, which our mayor has clearly written. Which she shared.
I shared. I've been taking my notes during class. So as Turner said, class is almost dismissed. Oh, yes, Mr. Hegelson, yes.
One thing I would like to say, and I want to thank the superintendent and our city manager I was reminded about some of our last retreats where we heard about lole cole to ad nauseum. We heard about, I sat with Dr. Senna before, and we heard a lecture on why these 17 schools or divisions that we compared ourselves to was based on something other than pulling rabbits out of hats. This one was fabulous, where we did what we're supposed to do, where we talk together. And we throw in different ideas, and we tell the perspective of why we think this, and so this was much better, and thank you both for this, and thank you everybody here that's participated. This is much better. I'm just waiting for somebody to lecture us for an hour and a half so I could get caught up on my napping, but that didn't happen, so that was good. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Helgelson. Just in closing thoughts, thank you all, everyone, for spending the time. We need the time to talk. We need the time to brainstorm. We need the time to look at each other because we all have leadership roles in this community. So I took a few notes. One, we are more alike in our thinking than we are different. And that came forward through our questions and through the responses that we got. We all want what is best for our students, our families, and our residents, our constituents. Whether you have kids in the school system or you don't, it affects us all, the education system and the success of it. Strong, successful, quality education system is what we want that serves as an economic driver for our city. I think we're hearing that through some of the conversation. We want the responsible fiscal investment, and this is what our schools are. They're an investment. We talk about having a thriving city. I think Dr. Coleman was looking at my notes right here because I said in the corner, live, work, play, and learn.
Oh, good.
So I don't know if you were reading sideways or not, but a thriving city that supports long-term vision, not just this year's upcoming budget, what we're going to put through for next year, but the long-term vision and how do we build that for stability in our communities and our neighborhoods and prosperity for our community. We talk about a lot of the downsides, but we really want the thriving piece to happen, to take root and go forward. I would hope that through this we are creating new expectations and standards that create a mutual pathway for going forward. Our ecosystem that creates a holistic approach to education in our city, a collaborative approach, and we have as much as a city to invest in that as schools do to reinvest. So we have to look at it from that perspective. And I would also say that we all are going to have conversations leaving this meeting because our media has been here and she's going to do a great job reporting all of this. We appreciate it. But our community, as far as individuals and neighborhoods and households have to step up. We have to step up with you as an education system and not against you. So one thing that I do say when I go to meetings is that I don't want to pit public safety versus education versus public safety. Everyone knows we have a police building to build. Everyone knows that we have to invest in our education and our buildings. But the community, our neighbors, our citizens, they need to know that too, because it affects their quality of life if we don't. So that serious conversation, maybe from each of us, has to go out as well. We're responsible for helping create the vision and the narrative for our residents to make the hard decisions and find the steps towards solutions. So we can no longer just say it's you all problem and we don't have enough money. We can't just keep saying that. The money is not growing off of trees, and our state, our state's going to look a little better, as Councilmember Pero said. So how do we go get that, and how do we ask them to give it to us in a way that we are building a plan moving forward? How do we develop our own talent pool? We talk about salaries and increases. We've touched some of that. Our human capital in this city is important. So even as a city, as a school system, the poverty amongst our students, our families, and our neighborhoods, and also our own staff is very real. And so I think we have a responsibility to do that HR thing and the layers of how we train and how we tag our own folks outside of the teachers and out into these workforce programs and these increased opportunities, because just because someone is at one level doesn't mean they want to be there for 15 years. And so we have to maybe sometimes encourage people on how to move up and onward and forward. So that's one thing. Outcomes, action, collaboration, vision, new investments, new partnerships made in our city, new opportunities. And with that, I think the ideas of subcommittees are good. More work for people, but I think they're good. We have a great new high school that came out of a task force collaboration, Heritage High School. So the idea is not new of how we can work together on some of these issues. And with that, I think I leave all of that to our superintendent and our city manager on how to figure out the details. So
we end up with homework.
So I thank you. It's 10 minutes. If anyone has anything, parting words you want to say, or we can leave on Councilmember Hegelson's note. And y'all have a great evening. Thank you very much. And thank you, staff, that came and watched us or were support behind us. So thank you.